Welcome back, and we're continuing with We the People, and our guest for this portion of the show is Dr. Patrick Moore. Patrick, pleased to have you on We the People.
Thanks, Art. It's a pleasure to be here.
Patrick just got back from the Soviet Union, and he's a friend of Councilman Ed Tuttle, and they were kind enough to arrange for Patrick's visit here to our show. Patrick, you were in the Soviet Union this past fall.
That's right. I was attending some medical meetings with, there was a group of American medical doctors who went over as a scientific and cultural exchange to have a chance to work in the operating rooms with the Soviet surgeons and Soviet anesthesiologists and come to understand common problems that we as doctors over here in the United States are dealing with and how the Soviet counterparts are dealing with.
And how many doctors went over from...
In this particular program, there were 11 doctors.
And you were over there for a week or two?
Yes, we were there for several weeks and then went on to China and did the same thing in China.
What's the Soviet Union like, Patrick?
Well, the Soviet Union, my impression, one of the most outstanding things is that technologically they're so far behind us. It was kind of like a time warp. It was like going back to 1940. In a way.
In their medical technology?
In their medical technology and across the board.
Oh, really?
Everything. It was like way back.
And they realize that they are behind when they speak to American doctors such as yourself?
Oh, yes. I'm certain that they're aware. Oh, yes.
We should mention that Dr. Moore is a psychiatrist, an anesthesiologist, and also a songwriter.
Typical American.
That's right. Jack of all trades. So they are aware of the fact that they are way behind.
Oh, yes. I think that there's a tremendous forces within the Soviet Union right now that they're aware that their system as an economy simply doesn't work as well as ours.
They're behind economically as well, not just in science.
I would say just across the board, the impression is that they're way, way behind us.
Yes. And do you then, is it a one-way street in this exchange of medical information? Is it the Americans telling the Soviets the way it is and the way they should be doing it, or is there some reciprocal benefit that we get as far as medical information goes?
I think that that's a difficult question to answer. I mean, I told you before the show began that it was very interesting to me as an anesthesiologist to have a chance to see techniques and drugs used and so forth that I've only seen in medical history books.
Yes.
We don't use those techniques. It was very interesting, but I think there's a bilateral, overall, where we learn a whole lot. I'll give you an example. Before I went to the Soviet Union, in my mind, I pictured the people in Russia as basically all being hardline communists, take over the world, very rigid, unfeeling people.
Yes.
And in talking to not only the Soviet doctors, but the Soviet people that I had contact with, I found out unilaterally that everybody told me that it's only a small minority of people within the Soviet Union, perhaps less than 6%, who even belong to the Communist Party are supportive of it. Mm-hmm. And that was a shock.
And actually, the people, I understand, in the Soviet Union are aware of the fact that the system doesn't work, that there's a black market over there, there's alcoholism, there are all kinds of problems. And if you ask the average Russian and he would answer honestly, he would tell you the thing doesn't work, but they don't feel there's much they can do about it, so they survive despite the system, not because of the system.
Right. I think that my impression was that the Soviet Union is very sealed off, actually. And some people are aware, but I feel that a lot of them are not aware of the rest of the world and what's going on in this day and time.
So you and the other doctors on the trip believe that one of the ways to open up the Soviet Union a bit and to try and develop a dialogue between our countries is on this person-to-person basis, medical doctors speaking with their counterparts, scientists speaking with their counterparts, and try and do an end run, perhaps for the moment, around this governmental stalemate that we and the Soviets have on a government-to-government basis.
Right, exactly. I think that, or it's our opinion that, if you and I had a gun on each other right now, that would provoke a paranoid state. And this is the state of the whole world today. Now, you and I can sit here and argue about who's going to take one bullet out of the gun. Actually, let's say we have 20 machine guns on each other is more realistic.
Yes.
And we can argue about taking one bullet out or this or that, but that's not inspiring, and there's no real hope that from the common people, the people in your constituency here in California, that there's ever going to be peace from that. On the other hand, you can look at common problems, like medical problems, like scientific, like Carl Sagan has suggested that we have a joint venture to Mars. And he's not taken seriously.
Well, we had,
or apparently,
a couple of weeks
ago. I think that's an outstanding idea.
Patrick, we had guests a couple of weeks ago from the Beyond War movement, and we showed a picture taken from one of the satellites of the planet Earth, floating in that black void, that little blue planet, and that's a pretty powerful photograph.
And I think this is the grassroots for people all over the world becoming more conscious that this is one world, and what's taking place in any part of the world has an influence on us all. The United States is very protected, as you were mentioning earlier, and Americans, I think, have a tendency to fall into an apathy about what's taking place.
Well, we have our oceans on each side of us protecting us, and two relatively friendly neighbors to the north and south. You were mentioning, Patrick, that there's a great concern with peace in the Soviet Union. And, as you were saying before, a lot of Americans think of the Soviets as expansionist and they are the enemy. And yet there is a genuine concern about the dangers and the disaster that war wreaks, the Soviet Union having been invaded many times in its history, having lost 20 million people in World War II. So they are very sensitive to the tragedy of war.
Yes, I believe so. I might say that I myself, even now having been there, I'm still very skeptical of the communist system and communist ideology, and by no way am I supportive of any of those ideologies. But I was still shocked. The point I'm making is that the people in the Soviet Union are people, the same as you and I are people, the same as the average person on the street in America. And I was, fairly shocked to find the America series on ABC last week purporting a concept that, for instance, that the Soviet Union would take over the United States. To me that was, I have a vivid imagination, but before I went or after having gone to the Soviet Union, to me it is inconceivable that, we the people of the United States would suddenly change and agree to a Soviet backward type economy and social system is ridiculous.
A lot of people found the premise of that whole show just unacceptable. I guess the show started that somehow we were under Soviet control, and a lot of people just could not buy that could ever happen, as you're saying.
But what amazes me is like that here in California, where the seeds, the dreams of the American nation are sown and perpetuated through the entertainment and movie industry, that they put out these things like the America series or like Rambo type things, which are exploiting, if you will, the fears of the American people and also of the people around the globe.
I know one critic said that it was 14 and a half hours, but it didn't seem to be a minute over 12. I didn't see it, so I don't know. Well, what the average person feels somewhat powerless in America today to really affect a change. And do you think that the way to go about it is to petition the government to try and get people elected that are more sympathetic to arms control, that kind of thing? Or do you think that the most effective path for the average person to take is the kind of thing that you and the other doctors have been doing?
Oh, yes. I think that the average person in the United States is in a better position to effect a change toward world peace than the political leadership in both countries, for that matter, because if the leadership were really serious or came across as serious about the peace thing, they would have 1,000 people working 24 hours a day, how to make peace between our countries. They would personally, why is it that me as a physician or so many other people have been to the Soviet Union and talked to the people there. Why haven't our government leaders